Welcome, everybody, to This or That, the ultimate battle of taste. I, of course, am your favorite funny Indian, Rajiv Satyal. On today's episode, we're pitting blueberries versus strawberries, and also TikTok versus Instagram, and a whole lot more. So with that out of the way, let's get right down to it.
Instagram versus TikTok.
Instagram versus TikTok. I'm going to go with Instagram because I get a lot more likes on Instagram. I get a lot more engagement on Instagram. I got to go where the love is, man. TikTok, what are you doing to me? Okay, maybe these specific videos about TikTok could make it happen for me if I just keep saying TikTok, TikTok, TikTok. Maybe that will help. The first time I heard TikTok, I thought it was a Kesha song. People were talking about it on campus. I was performing at Brown University. I heard all these kids talking about TikTok. I go, these kids are like really behind the times. And I was like, oh, it's an app. I pieced it together. I didn't have to ask anybody. I kind of figured that out. But somebody was like, oh, did you see that on TikTok? I like TikTok. I'm down if you want to dance. But yo, man, Instagram is my jam. I think that they're doing amazing things. And I wasn't so into it when it was just photos because I'm like, yeah, this is cool. But when they got into videos, stand-up I feel like is just a little bit better on Instagram. I don't know why. Maybe it's because it's older. I used to say this at my shows. I'd be like, all right, if you want to find me, if you're in your, what did I say? If you're my age or older, I'll see you on LinkedIn. But otherwise, if you're like a little bit younger, Facebook, and then Instagram, then TikTok. I feel like it's very young. And then I get hit with, Snapchat's still a thing? No, I did not know that's still a thing. Just like if you have an @AOL.com. Some people in Hollywood still have an @AOL.com, and it is a sign of extreme opulence or richness or being hidden away from society. I'm like, yeah, I would have thought those people don't even exist anymore. But yeah, apparently it's a thing. Get an AOL.com.
70s music versus 90s music.
70s music versus 90s music. I am definitely going to go with 70s music. I think that the 1970s had arguably the best rock ballads. You had this just massive, massive wall of sound. Of course, that's Philip Spector, 1960s thing. But my point is, I think music probably peaked somewhere, rock music especially, in 68, 69. And then it sort of gradually came down, peaked a little bit back in the 90s and went back down again. So especially if we're talking about rock music, you got to go with the 70s. The Beatles broke up technically December 1969, but Let It Be came out in 1970. And then the second best band of all time, Led Zeppelin, started in the fall of 68. They go all the way through the 70s till 1980. You got two amazing bands. They are number 1 and 2 any way you slice it, okay? So that's two huge things for the 70s. You also have the advent of disco. I know rock people don't love disco that much, but disco brought so many people into the fold, into the mix. That stuff is still around today. They say, are dinosaurs still around today? Well, they are, because if you look at birds, that's what they say. Well, that's what EDM is. It found its roots in disco, played out the string over and over and over after that. So I'm glad that we went 70s versus 90s because it's definitely not the 80s. I love the 50s and I love the zeros, but it is probably a battle between the 70s and 90s. Also, if it's close, you got to give it to the older era because it came first. This is like comparing Seinfeld versus Curb Your Enthusiasm. You got to have an old bias, not a recency bias. That's why I think the 70s over the 90s when it comes to music. The other thing I would say is hip-hop started then. We just celebrated last year the 50th anniversary of hip-hop. I think it's a little early. 1973, I don't think that many people were bumping hip-hop in 75, 76, 77. I think it became more of a thing in the 80s. That said, its roots are clearly in the 70s. So you've got this amazing explosion of music that's happening in the 70s. You have Queen. You have all these other bands. You have Fleetwood Mac. You have Elton John at his peak. I don't know. To me, I'm going to have to say the 70s over the 90s by quite a lot. And by the way, I went to high school and college in the 90s. If I'm saying the 70s, it's the 70s. Maybe because I was born in 1976.
Switch it up a bit. Arranged marriage versus love marriage.
Arranged marriage versus love marriage. I'm going to have to go with love marriage because that's what I had, all right? So people in my generation that are, born in this country, immigrant parents, it's kind of a mix. You have your dating options here because you can meet somebody at a bar. You wouldn't tell your parents you met at a bar. Oh, we met at the library. That's why there's a place in Chicago, a bar called the Library. There's one here in LA too. It's called the Library. Where'd you guys meet? The library. Sounds very innocuous. Okay. Innocuous is a word that, every Indian kid knows because we were all going to be doctors at some point. Didn't always work out. So I'm going to say love marriage because, dude, still love and marriage, it goes together. Isn't that what Frank Sinatra sang a long time ago? Arranged marriage, though, has actually a very high rate of success because if you think about who knows you really well, it's your parents. And Russell Peters has this great bit where he says, my mom offered to pick out a wife for me. I won't even let my mom pick out my shoes for me. Funny joke, but your parents actually do know you pretty well. So arranged marriage is not necessarily the worst thing. They match things up. There's astrology involved. All of these things are happening. But I think if I had to go, I'm going to go love marriage. Plus, I'm in a love marriage. And if I said arranged marriage, it'd probably be like admitting I don't have any love in my marriage at all. I would say, though, that my parents actually in 1972 had a love marriage in India. Okay, early 70s, India, love marriage, totally taboo, wasn't done back then. Although it was kind of an arranged marriage, too, because my dad arranged to become... I can't do my own joke. Okay, my parents had a love marriage, although it was kind of an arranged marriage, too, because my dad arranged to become a completely different person after they got married. Boom, got it.
I don't know how many tries that was, but you got it.
Oh, my God, 4 tries, my own joke.
This is one I know will be hard for you. Chai versus coffee.
If I have to pick between chai and coffee, it is difficult. I'm going to go chai. And most of the Eastern Hemisphere drinks tea, and most of the Western Hemisphere drinks coffee. So because I'm an amalgam of both, right? I'm Indian American, they see American, South Asian American. I prefer Indian American. I'm going to still say tea because, I don't know, maybe that's giving it up too hard to colonialism and the British and telling us to put milk and sugar in this, but I'll call it doodh and chini, and that will make it sound more Indian. There is something about chai, and that makes me feel like I'm at home, right? There's this whole idea of feeling like whatever you're consuming takes you back to a certain place. And the olfactory sense, right? The smell sense is the one that really pulls you back to a place. 21 Pilots sang about that. The point being that I do love coffee, and this is more of a coffee culture. The United States is more coffee-oriented, and I feel like if I got to get a lot of work done, I'm probably drinking coffee. But early in the morning, if I have to pick between the two, coffee gives me the jitters, so I'm wired and tired. It's not a great combination for me. So if I have to pick between the two, I'm going to say chai. I'm also going to commit some blasphemy here because I pretty much put only doodh and chini in. I put milk and sugar in my tea, because the balance of lychee and cardamom and turmeric and everything you got to get for me is so specific that really only my mom can nail it, my wife can nail it. So whenever I go over to your place, I'm probably going to say, go ahead and just hook me up with some chai, but it's going to be like chai light. It's very difficult for me right now because I'm not drinking either one. I'm getting migraines, so the neurologist goes, why don't you do 6 to 8 weeks of no caffeine? I'm like, is there another plan? He goes, no. I go, 6 to 8 is a big gap, okay? There's some standard deviation going on here. Is it 6 or 8? He goes, I really want you to make it 8. It's been very hard because there's caffeine even in chocolate. So I'm not supposed to have chocolate, chai, tea, coffee, not even decaf. So it's been really hard. I've now been making this drink that I have sitting right here. That is almond milk, lemon, honey, and cinnamon. Cinnamon, as you may remember from the Seinfeld episode, is not going to take a backseat to chocolate. They go to get a babka, and Elaine wants a chocolate babka. She settles for a cinnamon babka, and Jerry goes, hey, look, cinnamon takes a backseat to no babka. It comes back time and time again. What's in this? What's in this? Cinnamon. So you know what? Thank God for cinnamon. You're getting me through my non-chai and non-coffee days.
Apple versus Android.
Apple versus Android. I'm going to go Apple because, I don't know. I got hooked into the Apple world. It's cooler. It's also like I'm a dork with cool friends. And so if I carry an Android, I feel like people will be like, oh, he's a dork. But because I carry an Apple, it just barely pushes me a little bit closer to the cool side. And it's sad that I care that much about that. But I like the blue bubbles. I like blue. Blue is my favorite color. I like green too. But you get the blue bubbles and you feel like you're in this world. I think it is a little bit of a fashion statement. That said, I am not up and up with my iPhone. I'm still rocking a 13. I'm fine with that. I don't think it matters because of the shape. You can't really tell. I mean, I think you probably could hold up your phone and go, oh, because of the number of cameras on the back and the lenses and whatever else. I'm going to go Apple over Android. Why else? I don't know. Maybe because I don't like apples as a fruit, so it's a way of compensating against that. An apple a day keeps the doctor away. I'm not totally sure.
You don't like apples?
I don't like apples. I think they're very basic. I don't hate them, but no, I don't love apples. They'd be like my 12th favorite fruit, maybe 15th.
I think I already know the answer, but Friends versus Seinfeld.
If I got to go Friends versus Seinfeld, I'm going Seinfeld all day. Here's a fast fact. I had not even seen an episode of Friends until like 5 years ago. I think it was like pandemic, right before the pandemic, something like that. Okay. I feel like Friends is a funny show. It's good. It's kind of mass. I think it's kind of basic. I think Seinfeld is more of a top shelf show. I just think that the jokes are sharper. It's better written. It's a little bit more intellectual. I don't think there's much of a comparison between these two shows. I think they are compared. I think Friends and Seinfeld are compared because they happen in the same decade. But if they didn't, I don't think we would be comparing these shows. The other side of it is Jerry Seinfeld is a comedian. I'm a comedian. So, of course, I'm going to be drawn to a show about a comedian. That's also why I like Curb Your Enthusiasm. So you look at the spin-off potential. Seinfeld spun off one of the best sitcoms of all time, Curb Your Enthusiasm. And that is actually a very good question. What's better between those two? But, of course, a guy, basically, the original concept for Seinfeld was going to be Larry David and Jerry Seinfeld, who are the Paul McCartney and John Lennon of writing sitcoms, okay? It was really just going to be the two of them walking around and making fun of stuff. That was going to be the entire conceit of the show. So because it's got that soul, that build, that heart of here's what it's really about, it's just making observations and just dicking around, I think I got to go with Seinfeld.
Man, I've never seen Seinfeld.
Never seen an episode?
No. No.
Maybe
I've seen clips, but...
Start at the beginning. It's slow in the beginning. Seinfeld is a slow burn in the beginning, but I don't know. Seasons 4, 5, and 6 are the strongest I've ever seen.
You mentioned it before. This one will be hard for you. The Beatles versus Led Zeppelin.
The Beatles versus Led Zeppelin. I'm going to go with the Beatles just barely. I've spent a lot of time thinking about this because they are my two favorite musical acts. REM is third. It's kind of a random curveball to go from the Beatles and Led Zeppelin to REM. All rock bands, all white rock bands, whatever you want to make of that. I oftentimes compare quantity because when the quality is that close, you think about how many minutes of music do these bands make. The Beatles came earlier, so I am old bias, not new bias. I don't have as much recency bias. And the Beatles have something like 250 songs. Led Zeppelin has, I think, 90. Now, Zeppelin songs are much longer. They tend to be like 6, 7, 8 minutes. I'd be interesting to see the average runtime of a Zeppelin song, but I'm going to guess it's probably like 6 minutes, 20 seconds. Maybe a little less because they do have some shorter songs. I'm going to say, okay, maybe 5:45. Okay, we'll look it up. We'll see if that's right. The Beatles' runtime average is probably more like 2 minutes, 45 seconds. So it might be closer than we think, the 90 and the 250. But that said, Zeppelin is incredible, and they get me in my loins. They get me closer to like who I am as a person. That's the only kind of music that does that for me. They're Punjabi music. I did not grow up on Punjabi music, but I'm Punjabi, and Punjabi music does that to me too. Like it gets me in a place. I said loins. I don't know, but someplace deep inside where I'm going, oh my God, this is my shit, yo. I love this. Zeppelin's even deeper than that. So like blues rock from the 70s, especially Zeppelin. But the Beatles have such soaring, amazing lyricism on top of the music, and they have more range. They just have more range. If you look at Helter Skelter versus When I'm 64 versus Happiness is a Warm Gun versus She Loves You, these are Strawberry Fields Forever, my favorite song. They are all so different. They have 3 different phases. They got their oldies, then they got their psychedelic period, then they got their classic rock period. There were so many firsts that they pioneered. Yeah, I'm going to have to go with the Beatles. They're also just... they sell more records. I think the fact that the Beatles went to India does influence it possibly a little bit. Zeppelin had a lot of Indian influence as well. And I don't know if they played with Ravi Shankar, but they have a couple of tabla tracks, so there is an Indian influence. A lot of Indians love Led Zeppelin. I didn't know that. I was introduced to it by a bunch of my white boy friends in Ohio and later found out that, a lot of Indians love Zeppelin. I think even more than the Beatles. So I don't know. There is a connection. Actually, when the Beatles studied with the Maharishi, the song Sexy Sadie was actually called Maharishi. It has the same number of syllables, Maharishi, but they were afraid that they would get sued, probably rightfully so they called it Sexy Sadie.
Let It Be versus Let It Go.
I'm going to go with Let It Be. Is Let It Go Frozen?
Yeah.
Okay. Because my son listens to Let It Go too much or will start listening to it too much, I'm going to go with Let It Be. I'm a Beatles guy.
Blueberries versus strawberries.
I'm going to go with blueberries over strawberries because they are the only blue food that you can eat. There might be 1 or 2 other things, but blue is not a color that occurs in nature that you can eat. It usually means danger, so I feel like I'm living on the edge.
Karaoke versus trivia.
Karaoke versus trivia. Wow. I'm going to go karaoke only because I'm terrible at singing, but I love karaoke and I love the juxtaposition there. But man, I just won trivia night and there's really no feeling like that because you can win trivia. Karaoke is art, trivia is science.
Shaving versus beard.
Shaving versus beard. I'm going to go with shaving because it looks like you did some work that day. Someone's like, oh, if I did nothing else, at least I shaved. I like having a beard. I rocked a beard in Antarctica. Boom. I'm getting the same response from them as I did on the boat last night. It's about the same. I rocked a beard in Antarctica. And it keeps you warm, but I don't know. It's itchy. I don't love it. It's hard to make out with people like my wife.
Spider-Man versus Superman.
Spider-Man versus Superman. I grew up on Superman. The Superman movies were my jam. I know everyone now is like all Marvel. It was DC back in the day. Superman is way stronger. He can do way more things than any of the superheroes. So my default has always been Superman. But between the two of them, sorry, you both lose to Batman.
Whiskey versus wine.
Whiskey versus wine. I am definitely a whiskey person because you also know how much you're going to consume. It's proofed. It tells you. Wine varies. Somebody hands you wine. You don't know how much is in it. So I'm going with whiskey. And Punjabis love whiskey. So I'd be selling my people out if I didn't say whiskey. And that is it, or this is it, on this episode of This or That. Please subscribe, like, leave a comment. Let me know what you want me to compare. Something this or that. It goes further than you can possibly imagine. Thank you, and we'll see you soon. I've been your host, Rajiv, and I still am.